Hey there, Buffalo Prime here, bringing you some answers to the HR-related questions on Yahoo Answers, which is kind of a goofy place to ask questions. A lot of them aren't for real, so we'll see some goofy stuff. We'll see some good stuff, too. I'll try to provide my perspective as an HR professional that's been pretty experienced in the land of labor relations, compensation, employment law, union relations, everything like that. So hopefully you guys like what you see, but let's go ahead and dive right in to the litany of questions. Okay, so the first one I'm reading right here, it says working for one company for years. Now, the way that I'm going to approach this is that I'm not going to click on every single one of these and go deep into the actual bowels of the question itself. But if something strikes my interest, we will. Is it true that it's relatively bad to work for the same company for decades? I know this is a rarity these days. Would it look bad on a resume to say to a future employer to say, I'm stuck, and that's it? Let's see some of the answers first. Depends on who you ask. Some people mind it's a bad thing. Last job was 27 years. It's not only overseas, someone who working in the company, blah, blah, blah. These are more extensive answers than I'm used to. Worked at one company for 32 years, great retirement. I received many promotions because I was smart and worked hard. Depends on the company, right? So, like, if you work at a very tiny company with maybe 40, 50 employees for 32 years, maybe not, right? But a big corporation, 32 years can go a long way. There's no loyalty towards employees nowadays. Long-term workers are higher paid and become liability because it's cheaper to hire one or two younger workers. That's illegal. I was laid off a year ago after 19 years with the same company, 5 more years, and I could have retired. So, Scott, interesting response right here. First of all, firing somebody because of their age to hire younger workers is, again, illegal. If you were laid off and the company turns around and reposts your job, you could also probably talk to an attorney on that one because that seems pretty sketch. All right. Let me tell you this. All right. There's two sides to this answer. First of all, the average retention of a job right now is about 2 years. About every 2 years, turnover happens on average, especially with younger generations. That tends to be a lot shorter. Older generation, they tend to work at the same company for a long period of time because of the way the employee market has shifted over time. Right. So, 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. Well, not 10 years ago, but maybe like 15, 20 years ago, the process of getting a job was way more difficult than it is now. The process of benchmarking a job opportunity with another was way harder to do. It was way harder to see what the company down the street was paying and what their benefit structure looked like unless you knew somebody that worked there and you asked or you called them up and just happened to get that kind of information, right? So from a pure compensation and benefit standpoint, it was way harder and way more risky to change careers a long time ago. Recently, though, everything's an open book, right? I can look up any job that I've applied to and probably get a good idea on how much they're going to pay me, what their benefit structure looks like, and what some of the employees who work there think about working there, right? Pretty much every single company, except for very small localized companies, have reviews from past employees that can tell you a lot. And so this not only applies to the unemployed, but it also applies to people who are currently in their jobs, which means like if I'm not really that satisfied and I start looking, I can probably find a competitor that's hiring the same job for me and I can directly compare it to my experience right now, which may lead me to jump ship faster. It is way easier to get information about other companies at the blink of an eye. Right? So it's harder to retain employees because they're constantly looking, and that's not a problem, but that explains why there's turnover is so high right now, which here's the good side of the coin to this question. The longer you stay at a company, actually, I would argue the more impressive it is right now, especially. Like even if you work for a company for 5 years, right? This person's saying decades. That's actually kind of nuts. Let's say you work for a company for 5 years, future employers will be foaming at the mouth saying, look at this loyalty. 5 years is incredible. Right now, almost unheard of. So staying at a company for 5+ years, especially if you have any form of progression within that company, is going to look great on a resume. Decades, even more so, right? But it also isn't going to look bad if you've only worked at a company for a short period of time, unless you have an extensive history of only working at companies for a short period of time. And even then, sometimes employers will be like, well, why'd you switch from each job? Give me a reason, because there might be a good reason for that. But would it look bad on a resume? I would say no. Most employers are going to be pretty happy to see you and pretty excited to see that kind of extensivity. And they are going to be very curious as to why you want to leave if you have a longer extensive history with the company. So, okay. Is it rude to ask how much a job pays? No. But you have to be careful how you do it, right? So if you're in an application process, asking that sort of question might turn off your employer. In fact, actually, when you're going through an interview process, the wage scale of that job should be like one of the last things you discuss, in all honesty. Do most jobs hire on the spot? No. In fact, actually, it's pretty sketchy if a job does do that. That means they're desperate and they probably have high turnover. I hate working. Why should I ever get a job? Here we go. I'm a 20-year-old girl and I haven't had a job before. I never went to college either. I dread working. I don't ever want a real job. Right now, I'm making $3,000 a month with OnlyFans. Not a lot, but it's good money for me at least. What, $3,300 a month, right? Times 12? Forgive me for being stupid. This girl's making almost 40 grand a year. That's pretty good. Depending on where you live, obviously. My parents keep telling me to get a job, but I feel like I'm too good for working a normal job. That's not true. You barely make 40 grand. That's not too good for a normal job. You are making good money for a 20-year-old. I'm trying not to brag, but there's other things I could be doing instead of slaving at work. I'm not that type of person. You feel me? This is a good question. Let's answer it. If it's working for you right now, it's fine. At some point, that will no longer work for you. What do you have a plan then? Do you hope to attract sugar daddies or a husband to take care of you? And again, if that's your plan, make sure you have a decent lawyer set up for a prenup. That's going in a weird direction. $3,000 a month, $36 a year. That's $17 per hour. Can you earn that anywhere in your city? Well, then make certain you pay your taxes. Save half your income in case you can no longer be a media influencer. Okay. Do you think you'll be able to make $3K from a month when you're 40? Prison is in your future. Lord, I got to give you a thumbs down on that one, my guy. Prison is in your future. Jesus Christ. So first of all, the sex industry, which it's a very blanket term, right? If you work in an OnlyFans, it doesn't mean you're a sex worker, but you are basically selling, the appeal of your physical attire or satire, not satire, you know what I mean? You're basically selling your attractiveness to other individuals at a higher rate of money to see more than free content, right? You're charging for premium content on basis on how you look, and that's completely fine, and it's a very valid form of revenue. And if you can do it, that's great. $3,000 a month is pretty incredible. I'll be honest with you. If I could make $3,000 a month doing what I'm doing right now, I would do that. Well, I'm doing it anyway, but $300 a month from YouTube revenue, that can grow over time. I wouldn't worry too much about that one. The OnlyFans one is the reoccurring monthly, where YouTube is ad revenue. So ad revenue can spike at any time. So the OnlyFans one is what I'm going to focus on here. So I would say there's two answers to this as well. We'll do an optimistic answer and probably more of a realistic answer. If you were making $3,000 with an OnlyFans, no, don't get another job. You're fine. Like, do exactly that. Make sure you're honing your skills though, because first of all, it's probably going to be difficult to parlay OnlyFans into a professional environment, right? So if you are, let's say, you never went to college. Without a college degree and you only have OnlyFans as you could probably tailor that to say that you're a content creator, media influencer, and you could probably look for like social media based jobs or public relations jobs. But most of those places still want you to have a college degree. So it's going to be really difficult for you to parlay that into a realistic job, right? After, let's say you get fed up with OnlyFans and you want to get an actual job in the workforce, which it sounds like you don't want to, that may be difficult, right? But can you sustain your entirety of your life without having a legitimate job? I put that in quotation marks because I think OnlyFans can be legitimate as well. Yeah, just keep doing what you're doing then. There are people who are going to make a living long into their life by being a part of social media, by being a part of being an influencer, a YouTuber, OnlyFans. Like, you can parlay that into long-term success if you work basically twice as hard as anybody else is going to work at the corporate scene. And I say that because a lot of the top individuals at Twitch that are streaming, that are doing YouTube, that are doing OnlyFans, in all honesty, are parlaying that into multiple platforms. Like, you're starting to see this on people who are considered content creators and media in social media influencers and things like that, is that you don't have only one avenue for putting out your content, right? So people who are really popular on OnlyFans probably also doing Instagram modeling. They're probably also doing, again, YouTube blogs and things like that. They may have some stuff on Twitch as well. Like, they are multifaceted, and that takes a lot of work. So I'm going to go ahead and say that if you don't want to work a real job, just know that in order to make progressive earnings throughout the entirety of your life until eventually, again, some people hinted at it, there may be a point in your life where OnlyFans isn't going to work anymore because you get too old. You have to work probably way harder than you would, being a social media or marketing intern into an actual career, into maybe even some form of leadership at a corporation, right? You're going to have to work way harder doing independent work. Plus, you need to be tax savvy at that point. Make sure that you're putting away for your benefits, because there is going to be a point in time where you're going to need to see a doctor at some point. And having OnlyFans, YouTube revenue and stuff like that, it's not going to pay for that very well. You're going to need insurance at some point. You should be saving up for your retirement in the event. You should also be saving up in the case that something catastrophic happens. The world of social media, the world of being an influencer can rapidly change with one mistake that can really throw away your entire career. But yeah, I think that's legitimate. You could definitely build up. I think RNC puts a good point in the chat. Getting a part-time job is probably pretty good too. You can probably get a part-time job at like, even look at like if you're really into like fashion and stuff like that, you can find fashion-based jobs. One of the jobs that I was thinking of, if worst case scenario happens, was working at Men's Warehouse because I love suits and I think it would be dope to learn about being a tailor. Like that would be cool, right? So I would consider getting a real job that maybe is part-time or per diem, which means as needed. Per diem also means something different if you get money from a company to go on a project or something like that. But get a job in something that interests you. If you're a gamer, work at GameStop. Well, I've heard a lot of bad things about GameStop, but maybe individual areas aren't that bad. But if you're a gamer, like go get a gaming related job. Go work at a card shop. Go work at a board game shop. Go work at an arcade. Like, I don't know. Do something that gives you some form of employment history because that'll help you and this stuff falls flat, which it may or may not. That's up to you. But yeah, so moral of the story for Miss Anonymous right here, you are going to have to work a lot harder to make the amount of money that you want to make, but the amount of money that you can make doing this sort of stuff is way higher than what you can probably make getting a real job. But it also could be significantly less, right? You're taking a big risk pursuing a career in what you're doing. But yeah, go for it. If that's what your passion is, do it. How do people usually get high-paying jobs, either with really high-demand jobs or jobs that don't have a lot of people in the market, extensive and advanced degrees, or they spend a lot of time in the industry? How is life being retired? I've heard it's great. Does anybody have advice for a new 18-year-old? Were you born 18 or you just have your birthday? I don't think I'm responsible enough to be an adult. Great, you're not yet, really. Unless you're going to go out and have your own job right now. You don't have to be, like, if you're 18, like, you don't have to think of yourself as an adult. Like, enjoy your life. How do I get a job with multiple felonies and a bad temper? Fix your bad temper. You got to fix that, right? The felonies is going to be one thing, but there are programs out there. The government actually funds a lot of programs that'll help you get jobs with felonies. But the bad temper thing, you need to get under control. Should I hand in my notice or wait? Okay, let's take a look. I had an interview with a company and it went really well. The interviewer said I'll need to start as soon as possible and he'll get back to me in a few days with an offer. He said I shouldn't say it, but I will be getting the job. Ooh, interesting. Should I wait till pen to paper before sending my letter of resignation, or could I go ahead and give a 4 weeks notice? What the fuck? Okay, here's the deal. In this kind of question, I'm not gonna dive too far into this because there's a lot of unknowns here, right? First of all, 4 weeks notice not required unless, like, even okay, I have to answer this. I have to go to the big screen on this. There's so much to unpack here. So I'm assuming everything I say is based on the assumption that we're in America, right? Because that's the only employment law I know, right? Okay, 4 weeks notice tells me a couple of things. First of all, you're giving way too long of a notice, all right? A company's not going to give you 2 weeks notice if they want to get rid of you, all right? 2 weeks notice is a kind of like a cultural placed notice period that companies have kind of absorbed to give them a buffer to at least post your job before you leave. And basically will qualify you for reemployment, right? That's basically the skinny of that situation. And even then, if you don't give a 2 week notice and that you go to apply and they're like, we're not going to rehire you because you didn't give a proper notice, court of law doesn't always like that. Court of law could be like, wait, what the, like, that doesn't matter. Like, you're basically, you're saying that you're not hiring them for a 2 week notice, but are you really not hiring them for something else? You know, like maybe a protected classification. Like, that's pretty sketchy too. So yeah, first of all, a company's never going to give you a notice if they're going to let go of you, unless it's a layoff. But even then, the reason that companies don't do this, there's a couple of them, right? But the biggest reason why a company will not give you notice if they, like, say, lay you off, fire you, definitely not, depending on what you did. But if they're going to lay you off and they don't give you much notice, is because there is a conception out there with employers that if I give you an ample amount of notice that you're going to be laid off, that you're going to either work badly, you're going to steal information, it becomes a liability. So yeah, companies are not going to give you a notice. Don't give 4 weeks. The only way that you should give a 4 week notice is if, and I've had this before, if your job designates that, hey, you need to give an X amount of notice for us to deem you rehirable. Okay? Again, in a court of law, that's going to be sketchy as fuck, right? But if you want it to be easier and you want to have an avenue back in, then yeah, maybe consider doing a 4-week notice, right? Because a lot of people have a misconception that PTO payout is tied to the amount of notice that you give. That's not necessarily the case. State by states have laws on how they pay for unpaid PTO. A lot of them don't require you to give a notice in order to be financially to be able to claim and basically have to be paid your unpaid time off and vacation hours. You don't have to give a notice to be given those in some states. Some states, I don't know. I don't know state by state law, but I know, like, for example, Michigan, where I'm at, yeah, you get your unpaid PTO regardless of if you're fired, if you quit without notice, anything like that, right? By the way, if your company treats you adversely and starts harassing you during that period of time, Title VII protects you. So a lot of companies will do that. A lot of bad managers will do that. Oh, you put in your notice? Fuck you. Piece of shit. You're a bad employee. Okay. We'll see what it... But you can't talk to me like that. Okay. The second thing I want to mention here, I don't think it's in this question, right? There was another question that talked about from a standpoint of referrals and references. Just a reminder to everybody that the only thing that a employer can legally say to somebody that inquires to them about you is your title, your start and end date, basically if you're actively employed or not, right? That's the only things that they can answer. If they answer anything beyond that, it's unlawful, right? Federal law protects against that. Unless you sign a waiver that says my previous employer can disclose other information, including wages, termination reason, performance evaluations, stuff like that, right? You would have to basically consent to that. Which is one of the things that you do when you fill out an application. They'll say, is it okay if we contact this previous employer? Even if you check the yes mark there, the only 3 things that an employer can answer is your title, start, and end date. That's it, right? So don't worry about that. If you give if you give no notice and leave, your employer can't be like, they didn't give a fucking notice and they're terrible. They can't do that. And if you find evidence that they did do that, go to your friendly attorney and talk about it. Anyway, okay, so here's the thing, though, and we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this question. You got told by an interviewer that said you got the job, but they'll get back to you in a few days. Guess what that means, folks? You didn't get the job. You don't have the job yet. Just because they say you got the job, but they need days to figure it out, that means you didn't get the job yet, right? Maybe it looks good, and hopefully in this scenario, you are going to get the job. But in this scenario right here, you haven't gotten the job yet. You have not gotten the job yet. Do not resign from your employer until you get a formal offer letter that you've accepted and you're ready to go, right? That's when you should quit, okay? I don't care if they're telling you you need to start as soon as possible. That's fine. Again, a 2-week notice is good business practice for you, and it's set up culturally. You don't necessarily have to do it, especially in a job that you don't have any intention of returning to, right? But yeah, don't be stupid. Don't give up your current revenue for potential revenue unless you got a bar none you're going to start. Okay? What is 1.5 annual leave balance? I had 7.5, booked 6 days off. Now it says 1.5. Bro, does this guy know how to math? What's 7.5 minus 6, chat? I think it might be 1.5.